My name is Jeff Sutherland. I'm here to talk about distributed Scrum. I'm the founder of Scrum, which started in 1993. By 1995, we were distributing Scrum all over the United States and then all over the world. I am personally on a distributed Scrum team. My company runs completely by Scrum. One of the things we want to talk about first is the environment that needs to be created to get Scrum working well, and this is true whether you're co-located or distributed. The values behind the implementation of Scrum are critical. The first one is focus. How do you build focus on a team? All the events in Scrum are designed to get the team focused on an objective and a set of backlog to be created. I noticed when we were beginning to put together Scrum, you'd ask the team in the morning, okay, what are the most important things that we want to do today? Everyone would agree, and then they would go and do something completely different. So we had to set up a way of working that enabled people to focus and check in and make sure they're on focus all the time. And so our daily meetings, our sprint planning, our sprint reviews, our retrospectives, all the aspects of Scrum are an attempt to bring focus. Out of that focus, we really want people to feel a sense of commitment to the work. So in order to enable that, we need a system, a pull system. Scrum comes out of lean product development, which is a pull system. The people decide how much work they're going to do. They decide how they're going to do their work. And when they decide that, we want a feeling of commitment to achieve that work. So setting up an environment where you're not telling people what to do, you're telling them what the objectives are, what the priorities are, and then having them figure out what to do is central to building commitment in a team. The third aspect of Scrum values that's really important is openness. The whole Scrum process is built on inspecting and adapting. And so we need transparency, we need openness, and in a distributed environment, particularly in some cultures, it's hard to get people to be open, honest, and transparent. So the Scrum Masters, the product owners, the Agile leaders, they need to really work on trying to build that openness and transparency in the culture. To be open requires courage. It's not easy for people to be honest. It's not easy for them to tell you that there's a problem, but Scrum is based on surfacing problems, prioritizing them, and then removing them one by one. So if you can't get a culture that talks about problems as system issues that need to be fixed, if you can't get that process working, Scrum is not going to work very well for you, whether it's co-located or distributed. And finally, to enable that openness and courage to operate, there needs to be a lot of respect for people. So treating people well, listening to them is critical. Respecting them, adopting their ideas, taking their input. The same thing is true for the customers, because the Agile way of working is to try to put the customer first. So having respect for the customer's wishes, having a sense of respect for what the customer has to go through to use the product. Creating an environment where the customer feels really good about using the product you're creating. So these 5 values are core to creating an environment where Scrum will work. And if you have a distributed team, you really need to have them get together and agree on how are we going to build these values into the way we're working on Scrum. Only then will we get the high performance that's possible with implementing a Scrum team well, whether it's in one location or many locations. So those are the Scrum values, and in the last release of the Scrum Guide, we put them front and center, the start of the Scrum Guide. This is where you start with Scrum, creating an agile culture that can enable teams to really perform. So the most important thing for a distributed Scrum is to start by creating a culture where these 5 values are implemented. In the most recent edition of the Scrum Guide, we move them to the top of the Scrum Guide, front and center. The ability to get people focused, the ability to get them committed, the ability to encourage openness, which requires courage, which means you have to respect the people. These values are central to building high-performing Scrum teams. We're talking about distributed Scrum implementation. The first thing you need to think about in distributed Scrum is what the Microsoft Process Group did. How does it actually work in practice? And when Microsoft looked at all the distributed work they were doing, they found in every case, distribution reduced the probability of success, increased the delivery time, and reduces the team's performance and increasing dysfunction. So they said at Microsoft, we have to have a business case that overwhelms these impediments to distributed work. So for many people, they think that you can save money by doing distribution. I work with a venture capital firm. We have almost $1 billion invested in many, many companies. We want them all doing Scrum. They're all distributed. We find that the only way that we can get actually reduced cost distributed is to set up the Scrum very carefully, which is what I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about the first distributed Scrum that actually worked in the sense that they could take local velocity, a high-performing local team, and they could distribute that velocity and performance across the globe. There's a paper published in the IEEE library on distributed Scrum, and it's about a company called initially Dynex, acquired by Cersei Dynex. They were a library system company with more than 12,000 library systems installed in 42 countries. They wanted to upgrade their technology to the latest web infrastructure. It was going to take over 1 million lines of Java code. They began working for about 2 years in the United States, and were not going fast enough. They had to distribute. The CEO of Dynex went around the world visiting companies, trying to find Scrum teams that could perform as well or better as the US Scrum teams. He could only find teams that could do that where the employment was stable. The teams could be stable for extended periods. And he found that mainly in Eastern Europe and Russia, and selected the best teams in St. Petersburg, Russia, doubled his team size, and immediately more than doubled the output of the teams. So these teams were set up, in this case, half in the United States and half in Russia, every team. And at the time, their technology was limited. But at the end of the day, we measured in function points their delivery capability, and their delivery capability was almost the same globally as a case study with a six-person co-located Scrum team, demonstrating that you can distribute velocity. But the challenge is, how do you set it up so that you can do that repeatedly? So we then I looked around the world for organizations that could try doing this again and be able to repeat it. I wanted to run it just like a clinical study. I used to be in medicine. We want to set up a model. We want to establish that model and repeatedly implement that model and show that velocity can be distributed the quality can be distributed, that the team size could scale up distributed, and everything would work. We did that, and we found there was some really important things that needed to happen, that the people needed to be brought together initially, work together. In this case, for this study, it was a study in Amsterdam where some Dutch developers were brought together with Indian developers in Amsterdam. They established a way of working and a velocity, and only when the Scrum was working well did they distribute it. Then they made sure there were same tools and technologies remotely and locally, and ran this model, and were able to achieve the same results as the Circe Dynix project. So understanding how to distribute Scrum, it's a really good idea to read these two papers on how it works. So today, I am in a Scrum team myself that's distributed, and I meet every day when I'm not traveling and not teaching, and I can get into the daily meeting. I'm meeting every day in the daily meeting. We do weekly sprints. I'm meeting every Wednesday, going through sprint planning, retrospective. Whenever I'm available, we do swarming online. And using these techniques, particularly video communication, we can get very high performance in a distributed environment. So the bottom line is that it's possible to get good distributed teams where you could distribute velocity, distribute quality of production, but only if you bring the teams together and get them agreeing on how they're going to work together. And then when they separate, they have the same tools and technologies remotely as locally, and they're meeting by video, doing all the Scrum events, the daily meeting, the sprint planning, the sprint review, by video, face-to-face. This way of working can produce really high-performing distributed Scrum teams. Okay, distributed Scrum. The key to distributed Scrum is constant communication. I'm on a distributed Scrum team myself, so I can tell you how it works every day to day, every sprint. To get started, you need to get everybody together in the same location, face to face. You need to build working agreements. How are you going to work together? It's better even if you do some work together and establish a rhythm of working together. We then, in my company, meet every quarter. We fly people in from all over the world, so all the teams can meet face to face for a couple of days to reestablish that close personal communication and close way of working together. It's really, really important that people know each other personally for teams to work well. So that's the first step, is getting everyone on the same page, getting them to agree on the way they're going to work together, and also establish a way of working that delivers results. When you move the team apart, you want to be able to get the same results distributed as you were able to get working in the same room. And that requires careful attention. Distributed Scrum requires more focus, more discipline than having people work in the same room. The second most important thing that we find is using video communications. We use video communications for almost everything, certainly all the Scrum events, any important personal communication. We don't call people on the phone. We get them on either Google Hangout or Zoom or Skype video. We get the video working. You want to see the person. You want to feel how they are. That works much, much better than phone communications or email communications or anything else. So some of the organizations I work with have open communications. One company I work with in Cambridge, Massachusetts has the video on all the time between Cambridge and India. People can see each other walking into the room. Sometimes they can yell at each other walking down the hall. Okay, so using the video to bring about the sense of closeness is critical. The third most important thing is to get away from email. Email tends to generate a huge amount of waste. You waste a lot of time looking for it. It tends to set up a task list that is in random order and takes people off of focus on what needs to be done. So you want Scrum tooling that has a clear backlog management system that's easy to use. And for any asynchronous communication, you want a tool like Slack or FlowDoc is what we would use, a tool where teams can have a steady stream of asynchronous communication so they know where they are. And anytime they want to talk in real time to one another, they go to video. Okay? This is really critical to get high performance out of Scrum teams. The fourth thing that I'm finding really useful and important on my team, the team that I am on, is to regularly swarm via video. So every morning at 9:30, we get everybody that's available online together just to talk. In there, we can do some product backlog refinement maybe. We can discuss issues that might take a longer time than would be available in a daily meeting. We get a feeling of what people are doing, how they're feeling, and that generates a lot more work being done, and it also builds a camaraderie on the team that is really valuable. And finally, the fifth thing is that the tools and techniques in every location need to be the same. You need to use the same Scrum tooling so everybody understands how the visualization and reporting of the Scrum system works. Everybody needs to use the same technical tools, the same build system, so that everything works together. All these tools and techniques need to be identical. In the best high-performing Scrum teams, they say, in India, it feels the same as it feels when I'm in the office in Amsterdam. So that common tool and technique approach is one of the key enablers of distributing high performance, both in terms of velocity of production and quality of the product. So the bottom line for high-performing distributed Scrum is these 5 things. Get everybody together in the same room periodically. Use video communications for any real-time communication, any Scrum event. Get away from email. For asynchronous communications, use a tool like Slack. 4, get the team on the video just to talk on a regular basis about what they're doing. They could use that time for planning and thinking and backlog refinement. And 5, make sure everybody's using the same tools and techniques, the same Scrum tooling, the same build system, the same technical tooling. If you get everybody on the same page, only then can you distribute high performance and high quality of the product that you're building.
Well, Jeff, welcome here at Delft University. Thank you for the talks that you've given. We have a few minutes for a short interview. I have 5 questions for you. The first one being, you told yourself on a distributed Scrum team, you're flying around the world. I'm not sure, but I think more than over 100 days you're sleeping in hotels and visiting companies. How do you deal with time zones when your team is distributed and you are, let's say, 12 hours apart from the home base?
Yeah. Well, we have people on the West Coast and the East Coast of the United States, and often in Europe. So this is the most important timing. So like today, I will have my daily meeting at 6:30 here. It will be 12:30 in Boston, and it will be 9:30 in Seattle. We have a bigger problem because I have a guy in Japan right now, but he's not on my team. So dealing with Asia is a little more difficult.
So you're sticking to the fixed time,
Yes,
and then
fixed
when
time.
you're abroad, the one abroad who deals with the problem.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another thing that was in your talk, which I found really interesting, you said, well, it's good to work distributed, but once a while, frequently you have to get together, see each other face to face and work stuff out. What's the frequency? I mean, weekly won't work. Once a year is probably too long. So what's the best
Right.
practice you've experienced?
What we've found is that it's critical to get people together every quarter. So we bring the whole company together every quarter. We use that to prioritize everything we're doing. The teams meet to reestablish, reaffirm, their guidelines, their agreements for how they're working on the team. You need that face-to-face to get the feeling of the people and a connection to the people so you feel like you know them. There was one time where we decided we were too busy for a quarterly meeting, and it was a disaster. So that was about 3 years ago. We've never missed a quarterly meeting since.
Okay. And do you plan them ahead also, that you also put the quarterly meetings in a rhythm, just like you do the planning and the
quarterly
retros?
meetings are in a rhythm. They're at the end of the quarter. So
the last Thursday or Friday
usually
of the quarter?
usually it's the week following the end of the quarter. So we have the first or second week after the end of the quarter. So we have all the financials as well too.
Okay. And how long does the meeting last?
Usually 2 days. And often that's followed by a third day where we pull in all the we have a lot of independent coaches that work with us. So the third day we'll have a coaching day.
So also a quarterly meeting in a rhythm, co-located.
Yeah.
A third question I have is that, Scrum provides a process which gives guidance, especially when you work in distributed, you know what to expect. So, but at the same time, you see people altering. So to which extent should you apply Scrum really by the book when you're in a distributed team?
Well, when you distribute it, it's even more important that you have a very disciplined Scrum. And people say, okay, it needs to be by the book in the sense that the pieces need to be there, but the book is not what it's about. Every event in Scrum has to have a delivery. The product backlog refinement needs to deliver ready backlog. We have to do that in a distributed way as well as we do locally, and that's harder when it's distributed. The sprint planning has to be clear. Everybody has to know what they're doing. The daily meeting has to. One of the things that my team has added is what we call swarming. At 9:30 every morning, everybody that's not in training presenting is on video talking to one another. And that can go on as long as it takes. We typically will review what we've been doing, maybe do a little backlog refinement, maybe share what we're thinking, getting a feeling for the people, building a sense of camaraderie, building that team spirit, we find is really important. Even more important distributed than if you were in the same room, would happen naturally.
Yeah, exactly. So normally you would meet at the coffee machine, but it won't happen when you're distributed. So you
plan the coffee machine.
You plan the coffee talks. Okay, that's cool. The one before final question. We're running this MOOC on global software engineering. You have a lot of experience. You travel the world. You see many companies. If to the audience, the people that participate, that are working distributed, if you would have to give them one recommendation, well, this is Jeff. This is the one final thing I would like to give to you. What would be that recommendation?
Well, the thing about getting distributed Scrum to work is the ability to focus. And we come back again and again to, in my team, every time we do a retrospective, it's usually something becomes the process improvement that is all about focus. We're not doing the daily meeting disciplined enough. We're not doing our retrospectives well enough. We're not doing pieces of Scrum well enough, and that's causing us to lose focus, and that reduces velocity and it reduces team performance. So constantly bringing back this focus is way more important distributed than it is co-located. It's a lot easier. And so distributed teams don't function well unless they can have a really strong focus on working together.
Okay, thank you. Well, then my final question. I know the Scrum Inc. is distributed, and I know in the beginning you were on the team, and there was a chief product owner, and in fact it was your wife.
Yes.
So my final question is, how do you deal in real life with your wife being your chief product owner?
Well, I think the same as you always have to deal with your wife. As long as you follow her instructions in the order specified, you're going to be okay. And when you don't, there are problems.
So Scrum doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay. But Jeff, thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation in the MOOC. It helps really out well, and I think you really clarified how Scrum can help in a distributed setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.